When a used car dealer tells you that a car is a real cream puff, almost like new with low mileage, hang on to your wallet. The car may have been around the block a lot more times than the odometer, the mileage meter, shows. Sellers turn back that clock to make buyers think the car is in better shape than it really is. And in Houston 9 months ago, we saw how easily it's done.
Well, there are two ways to do this. I'm going to do it the easy way.
This is not a demonstration for our television camera. What you're watching is a crime in progress. This man is adding about $2,000 to the value of this 1985 Buick by losing 50,000 miles off the odometer. In the used car business, it's called busting miles or whipping miles.
Where you grab them has a whole lot to do with how they turn out.
He doesn't know we're taping him. We set up a hidden camera in a nearby van before he arrived. He charges $50 a car and expects to make $400 today, tax-free, and he didn't even start until after lunch. These are the men who hired him, John Hazlett and Charles Vance, two former used car dealers who invited us down to Houston to help expose the crooks.
As far as odometer rollback men themselves, the person that does the mechanics of it, there's, I would say, 50 in town.
Find them in the yellow pages?
No, but you can pick up the phone and do it. We did it. We had them waiting in line to do it.
The reason Charles Vance and John Hazlett know so much about the used car business is they were in it for 20 years until they got fed up and quit. They told us so many of their competitors were rolling back miles, there was no way to survive in the business without doing the same thing. Houston police told us they were trustworthy and reliable.
The way the business is right now is completely dominated and controlled by mile busters, which has inflated the car prices to a certain level that a legitimate wholesaler cannot operate in it.
One of the first people Charles and John introduced us to was Bill Whitlow, the heavy-set fellow in the boss hog hat. He's been a used car wholesaler for 40 years and is called the granddaddy of the Houston mile busters. Whitlow will buy a trade-in from a used car dealer, roll back the miles, then sell it to a different dealer. Our camera was hidden across the street when Whitlow began bragging about the tens of thousands of miles he's rolled off these cars.
That one was 65.
65. What's on it now?
And that one was 70. I know what it was.
And they're 40 and 40 now?
Yeah, let's see what they are. This got 39.
39,000 miles.
That got 42.
But rolling back the miles is only half the trick. The title has to be forged to match the new odometer reading. Charles and John told Whitlow that they already had somebody who could forge the titles. Whitlow said he could do it better and probably cheaper.
What's they been charging?
$200 a copy.
Oh, damn. I ain't gonna tell you who's doing mine, but
Well, how much will you charge me? I don't want to know who's doing it.
$100 a copy.
Damn, we'll go for that.
What about if,
Immediately.
What about if John gives you like 30 of them a week? Any cheaper?
We'll make a deal.
Okay.
Well, you'll handle them all.
Yeah.
So Charles gave Whitlow a title and asked him to forge it, lowering the odometer reading by 60,000 miles. When Whitlow brought the finished product by the next day, we had the camera concealed behind a wall in Charles and John's office. I put on sunglasses and posed as a friend of theirs who might want to invest $100,000 in Whitlow's rollback operation.
He's already changed the miles, and you can virtually not detect it.
I had never had one kick back on me. I guess I've been lucky, but I guess I ain't.
You that are good.
Just good work.
Yeah, good work.
Good work and plenty of it. Plenty of titles, plenty of cars.
How many of these you do a month?
Good months I'll do 75 myself.
Whitlow claims he makes less than $1,000 a car, but that's still pretty good money. How much money does he make a month?
I'm saying average month you'll make 50 grand.
50 grand.
Yeah. See, I'm not as fast as I used to be. I know how to.
The best part of it for Whitlow is, he says the $50,000 a month is all tax-free.
Well, I ain't filed income tax myself for 13 years, or 15 years.
But there's no wholesaler stand in this town that's making money. It's not whipping miles. Is that true?
I don't know none.
That's right.
This is not exactly legal, right?
What?
This is not exactly legal, right? What's the downside? I want to know what the downside is.
It's not exactly legal, no.
We found this Bill Whitlow special on the used car lot of Russell and Smith Ford, a 1987 Aerostar van, a real cream puff, and only 52,000 miles, according to the odometer. But Charles Vance and John Hazlett had been tracking this van. When Bill Whitlow bought it from another Houston dealer, it had 131,000 miles on it. When he resold it to Russell and Smith Ford, 80,000 miles had vanished. With our cameras hidden, we asked the salesman about the van.
52,000 miles.
Yes, sir.
And you're sure of the mileage?
You know, I just figured out who this man looks like. You look like that guy that does that 60 Minutes thing on TV. You do. You look like that guy.
Steve Kroft.
Yes.
How you doing?
You
Your
are?
name is?
Raymond Mesa.
Raymond. Nice
You're
to meet
not
you.
Steve Kroft.
I am.
No, you're not.
I am. What would you say, Raymond, if I told you that this car had 131,000 miles on it?
I'd say you could show me.
So we showed him an odometer statement proving that when the van was sold to Bill Whitlow, it had 80,000 more miles on it. That surprised Mesa, and so did our camera.
Yeah, that's amazing.
General Sales Manager Vincent Alfano and used car manager Tom DeLisi agreed that the van had been rolled back.
Of course, we probably took it in on a trade-in, and people who traded them in signed an odometer statement stating the actual miles that, you know, that's on the car. We don't follow these people around for years. We just take cars in on trade. And
Have you ever heard of a gentleman by the name of Bill Whitlow?
no.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
You know Bill Whitlow?
Yeah.
I think you bought this vehicle from Bill Whitlow.
73 number. It's possible.
Suppose I told you that Bill Whitlow told us just about an hour ago that the only cars he ever sells all had their odometers turned back. Would that surprise you?
Yes, it would.
Maybe he really was surprised, but Bill Whitlow had told us earlier that most dealers suspect his cars have been rolled back.
Well, they have an idea. They don't want to know it. You know, they got an idea, yeah.
No, that's not true, because I do not know that.
He's the only one in town that wouldn't know if he didn't.
I mean, it's just common knowledge. You know, flies gather on horses, Bill Whitlow hit miles.
Vance and Hazlett say it's not that difficult for a dealer to find out if a car's been rolled back. The dealer can check its title history, even its service record.
You could have taken 5 more minutes. You could have taken the serial number from this car, punched it into your computer, found out the last time this car was serviced, who owned the car, and what the mileage was, right?
I don't know. I imagine that's possible.
But authorities say few dealers make the effort.
If they bring it in, it looks like it's got 52,000 miles on it. It looks pretty clean.
Yeah.
You don't see any reason to check. You don't want to know if it's got more than that.
In my opinion, it's his obligation and his job to check that car. And if a man that's been in the car business for 20 years, like he said he had, and he can't tell the difference between 131,000 miles and 52,000 miles, he needs to get another job.
What percentage of the cars sitting on used car lots have had their odometers rolled back?
I'd say 40% of the cars.
Really?
I was going to say 50 out of 200 definitely, in cases that I've investigated myself.
How many Bill Whitlows are there in Houston?
There's only one Bill Whitlow. If you ask me how many mile busters there are in Houston, let's say there's probably 15 large ones and a lot of small ones. A lot of small ones.
At Greens Point Dodge, we found a red Toronado that had been whipped by another wholesaler. We showed the salesman proof that the car had gone at least 78,000 miles, even though the odometer showed only 49,000. This time, the sales manager didn't seem all that grateful for the information.
I don't have to talk to you. Now, you want to talk to me? Come on. What's the
We just
deal?
had a question. Hi, my name's Steve Kroft.
I'm Jim Willis. How you doing?
From 60 Minutes. We're here looking at this car, and we just wanted to know where'd those 30,000 miles go, and how did this happen?
I have no idea.
But you've looked at the piece of paper.
Yeah, I've looked at it. Now, I'm going to call the guy that could have sold me the car and make him buy it back.
But first, he gave us one last chance.
Do you want to buy the car?
I don't think we want to buy it at the price you're asking.
Then what are you worried about it for?
Clearly, someplace along the line, this car's lost 30,000 miles. And I just want to find out if you knew about it.
No, I don't know about it.
And
we do not do anything like that.
Apparently, Greens Point Dodge did not have anything to do with the rollback. The odometer was whipped by the wholesaler who had bought the car at an auction.
What do you say right here?
170,000 cars get auctioned every week. Many are high mileage, late model cars, perfect for wholesalers who can roll up profits by rolling back miles. Anglo-American Auctions, headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee, says it spent $2 million on a computer system to try and keep rollback cars out of its auctions. But Security Chief Gary Dickinson admits that he can't prevent buyers from busting the miles later.
We see where the problem is, and we're helpless to do anything about it.
Dickinson says the problem is every state has a different kind of title, and all but a few are too easy to forge.
What's the answer? A uniform title.
So you're talking about standardized title forms throughout the country?
Absolutely.
Would that wipe it out?
It would go a long way to start.
I'll tell you what, if I had to quit it, I'd get out of the car business.
Couldn't make any money if you didn't do it.
I don't believe there's enough money for me out there if I do it as a gentleman.
I want to show you one. I want to show you one thing.
All right.
You know what's back there?
What's back there?
Yeah.
No.
There's a TV camera back there.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
We've been taping this whole thing.
Well, all right.
The good news is, we're not cops.
Well, I didn't think so.
The bad news is we're 60 Minutes, and you're not worried about the cops.
Not really.
And by the way, according to Charles Vance, the truck Bill Whitlow rode off in had been rolled back 70,000 miles. After we left, Vance and Hazlett got threatening phone calls and a more serious warning. Someone fired 2 bullets through their office wall.
The gunshots were actually about less than 100 yards from where I live, so I have a major concern for my family at this time.
Vance and Hazlett say because we came to Houston, police are now taking a closer look at odometers, and dealers are taking a closer look at cars they buy from wholesalers. But the threatening phone calls keep coming.
Is this Charles Vance?
This is he.
The bullet holes you found in your building are nothing compared to the bullet holes you're going to find in your body. You and John don't stop this 60 minutes. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This is your last warning. I'm telling you this right now.
In response to our story, federal investigators indicted Bill Whitlow and 4 others for odometer tampering. 2 of them have already pleaded guilty. And 3 weeks ago, a man who confessed to shooting those bullets into Charles Vance's office said he did it for Bill Whitlow in retaliation for the 60 Minutes story. There have been lots of stories over the past few months on identity theft and how the information can be used against you. You may have heard something about stolen identity tax fraud. You may even have been a victim of it. It's the biggest tax scam around right now. As we first reported in September, this is how it works. Someone steals your identity, files a bogus tax return in your name before you do, and collects a refund from the IRS. It's so simple you would think it would never work. But it does. It's been around since 2008. You'd think the IRS would have come up with a way to stop it. It hasn't. Instead, the scam's gone viral, tripling in the last 3 years. The government says it's affecting millions of Americans and costing taxpayers billions of dollars every year, proving once again what every good con man already knows. There is no underestimating the general dysfunction and incompetence of government bureaucracy.
Tsunami of fraud that we have been encountering. The vast number of fraudulent tax returns was something that I don't think the IRS ever really was ready for.
Wilfredo Ferrer is the United States Attorney for Southern Florida, and George Pirro, the agent in charge of the Miami field office of the FBI. Together, they run a federal task force operating at the epicenter of the largest tax scam in the country.
Florida has been 3rd year in a row on the top, #1, in terms of ID theft complaints. And Miami is also #1 in terms of metropolitan areas that suffer from identity fraud.
Don't take this the wrong way. Is there any scheme that Miami is not #1 at?
We have very sophisticated and good criminals, Steve, who know how to defeat the system.
For decades now, South Florida has been the Silicon Valley for scam artists, drawn here by the weather, the beaches, and the opportunity to make lots of money without actually doing much work. There's Medicare fraud, mortgage fraud, securities fraud, and now what the Justice Department calls stolen identity tax refund fraud. a tax preparation scheme epitomized by an overabundance of questionable-looking establishments that have sprung up here over the past few years. But this scam is so easy you don't even need an office.
For this fraud, all you need is a laptop, someone's social security number, date of birth, not even their name. They can do it from their kitchen table, they can do it at a fast food chain restaurant, or they can do it on the beach as long as they have Wi-Fi access.
Actually, Corey Williams says you don't even need a laptop. You can file phony returns on your cell phone if you have the right app. He used to be a legitimate tax preparer until his boss turned him onto the scam. Before he was arrested and sentenced to 40 months in prison, he'd made millions and millions of dollars.
Anybody who knew about it, you'd be a fool to not try to get involved with making some money. I could wake up in the comfort of my own home and just get on a laptop, do about 15 returns a day. 15 times $3,000 a return, that's $45,000 a day.
So you had a home office?
Yeah, I used to work I would work in my boxes and the t-shirt. Yeah.
It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Williams gave us a demonstration. 1, you collect or buy a list of stolen identities that are readily available in Miami if you know the right people. 2, you go to one of dozens of tax preparation sites online, and using the stolen Social Security numbers and dates of birth, you fill out a completely bogus W-2 form claiming a modest refund of a few $1,000s.
It has given us a refund of $4,834.
3, you tell the IRS if you want the refund mailed to your house, wired to your bank account, or loaded onto a prepaid debit card.
Do you have any idea how many bogus returns you filled out?
It has to be like in the thousands.
Did the IRS pay all of them?
On a percentage range, you'd say they would pay out 40% of the tax returns.
Once you hit the send button, how long did it take you to get a check?
7 days.
7 days?
Yes.
So you'd send in these returns and 7 days later you'd get a check?
Yes.
40% of the time?
40% of the time.
Where would you have them send the check?
You could send the checks to an address, any address. I've seen cases where 25 checks came to one address and the mailman delivered it.
It sounded so outrageous we wanted to run it by the federal task force.
So you just put down a name and a social security number and you could make up an employer or the amount of money that was earned and withheld and send it off to the IRS, and they'll send you a check back for the refund?
They will pay most of the time unless they catch that there's some fraudulent, information, and then it's our job to chase.
I'm still amazed that you don't need to provide any documentation when you file your tax return.
There are no supporting documents when you're filing electronically. And that's the ease or the convenience that was created for the benefit of the innocent taxpayer, which is now being exploited by criminals.
You would think that the IRS computers would notice that they were sending thousands of checks to a handful of addresses, but they didn't. And you might expect that the IRS would match taxpayer returns with legitimate W-2 forms filed by employers. It doesn't do that either because the law requires refund checks to be sent out within 6 weeks, and employer W-2s are often not available until months later. So if a bogus return is received before a legitimate one, the check will go out to the crooks.
The way that you learn that you become a victim of this is when you go in and try to file your return and the IRS tells you, oh, you've already filed. You're like, no, I haven't. Oh, like, yes, you have. Well, it wasn't you, it was the fraudster who used your identity to file the return.
And it's not an easy problem to get fixed. Many of the people in this line outside the IRS office in Plantation, Florida, are victims of the fraud, waiting to prove their identity and claim their rightful refund. They will eventually be reimbursed, but it can involve massive amounts of paperwork, multiple visits to the office, and months of waiting.
Did you know about this before you got this job?
I had no idea about this before I started getting briefed last fall.
John Koskinen is the commissioner of the IRS, its fourth commissioner in just 2 years. It's become a high turnover position in part because the agency has been beset by a number of embarrassing problems, including stolen identity tax fraud, that have led people to question its competency.
I mean, it looks to me like the IRS got really outsmarted by some people who were not all that bright or not all that ingenious.
What happened was a lot of people discovered that A, Social Security numbers are either easy to steal or find or buy, and then B, you could file a false return.
Why didn't anybody anticipate that?
Well, I think it goes back to the fact that people didn't anticipate Social Security numbers were going to be so readily available. The assumption was, until very recently, that a Social Security number was a part of your identity that you protected and took great care of. So that no one actually ever expected that those would be easy to get a hold of.
But there were plenty of warnings. The Senate Finance Committee held hearings on stolen identity refund fraud way back in 2009, when then IRS Commissioner Douglas Shulman testified.
I discussed the issue of identity theft with the senior leaders at the IRS my first day on the job.
There were more hearings in 2011 and another in 2012 with Deputy IRS Commissioner Steve Miller.
We cannot stop all identity theft. However, we are better than we were, and we will get better still.
In those ensuing years, the number of cases of stolen identity refund fraud have risen from 51,000 to nearly 3 million.
In the year 2012, the Department of Treasury's Inspector General predicted that by the year 2016, IRS will be hemorrhaging and losing $21 billion due to this type of fraud.
It's only 2014. Don't you think something can be done in the next 2 years to fix this?
Well, that is my hope.
But it will not be easy. The entire IRS system uses Social Security numbers as its primary means of identifying taxpayers, even though they're now ubiquitous in public, private, and corporate files, just waiting to be stolen by thieves.
The key to this is to have somebody in the inside or someone who has access to our Social Security numbers, to our date of birth, and a lot of these individuals are insiders in big institutions, in banks, hospitals, schools, clinics.
We would approach anyone who worked at like a dental office, anybody who worked in the medical field. You would just approach them, you tell them if they get you 100 names, you would give them $1,000.
These people easy to find in Miami?
Very easy, very easy.
As you would think, if you went in and started knocking doors and asking people that worked at hospitals and doctors' offices and dentists' offices, somebody would call the cops.
No, they needed the money more than they wanted to call the cops. Everybody was with it. Everybody was with the scam.
Was this like a community of people doing this?
More like a nation of people doing this.
It's gone from hundreds of people filing hundreds of fraudulent returns to thousands of people filing millions of fraudulent returns, and it's become much more organized. U.S. Attorney Ferrer says some people are even setting up franchises.
We have had defendants, masterminds of these schemes, engage in filing parties. And what they do is that they invite their friends to a hotel room or to an apartment, and then they tell them how to do it in return for a cut of these tax returns.
You make it sound like Amway or Tupperware.
That's what we've seen.
Even Ferrer's old boss, U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder, had his identity stolen in an IRS refund scam. And a number of members of the task force have also been victimized, including North Miami Beach police officer Rocky Festa, who says local police departments have been hit hard.
Aventura had nearly the entire department, which was 50-some-odd officers got hit. Davie Fire and Davie Police, it was in the hundreds. They were all victims of tax return fraud.
Festa and his partner, Craig Caitlin, now work exclusively on tax refund cases and were among the first to discover the breadth of the scam 5 years ago when they began finding tax documents and stacks of prepaid debit cards when they pulled over suspicious vehicles.
Here's a wire plastic with the card.
You can get one of these prepaid debit cards almost anywhere, usually without providing identification. You then deposit and withdraw money from it as needed. It's like a bank account for people who don't have one.
Now, is that a real Visa card?
It's a real Visa card. And you can
you can go into a convenience store and buy a Visa card?
Right off the shelf.
If you want, the IRS will electronically deposit tax refunds directly onto these cards, no questions asked, eliminating the need for crooks to ever actually set foot inside a bank or to try and cash a refund check. They can spend the money in stores or withdraw it from ATMs.
So is this kind of like a throwaway phone?
Yes, sir. Yeah, once the money goes on the card, you empty the money off on ATMs and you put the card in the garbage. It's pretty good.
The prepaid cards are now used by millions of Americans to collect $142 billion in government entitlements, like Social Security and Medicare payments. IRS Commissioner Koskinen thinks it's an invitation to commit fraud.
The prepaid cards are the currency of criminals. Our problem is you can't distinguish the number of a prepaid card from a legitimate bank account.
Almost impossible to trace, right?
It is almost impossible to trace.
Why doesn't somebody put an end to that?
There are a significant percentage of the population unbanked, as it were called. Because if you don't allow them to use a prepaid card, they're going to have to get a check, and they'll have to pay somebody a lot of money to cash that check. So you're disadvantaging a significant part of the population.
And empowering a criminal network.
And you're empowering a criminal network.
5 years into the scam, the IRS can still not always tell if the person filing the return and claiming the refund is actually the real taxpayer. By comparison, the credit card companies are much better at flagging suspicious charges before they're paid out.
Credit card companies don't have that much of a problem with this. Why can't the IRS do that?
So that's the direction in which we're going. It's a significant move into what I call the 21st century. We're still kind of in the late 1900s. But this is still a big problem that while we're making great progress, we've got a lot of work to do.
And they're having trouble keeping up with the con artists. Last month, the IRS announced that hackers had busted into its computer system and stolen another 104,000 taxpayer identities, which so far have been used to collect nearly $50 million in bogus refunds. As for Corey Williams, he's now in jail, serving his 40-month sentence.
"1-800-CON-MAN" is a tale about credit card fraud, a billion-dollar business. And while that may not surprise you, I think what we found in Miami certainly will. It surprised us. For 4 long years before he was convicted of murder, a crafty con man named Danny Ferries ran a nationwide jailhouse shopping network.
For he ran it all without ever leaving his cell in Miami's Dade County Jail, where, believe it or not, inmates have telephones right in their jail cells and can make local calls and 1-800 calls free of charge.
I would challenge you, Mr. Wallace, if they put you in a room the size of your bathroom at home for years at a time with a telephone, that I would challenge you that you would come up with some pretty inventive stuff to do, because you do everything through the phone.
And that's exactly what Danny Ferries did. Using a telephone from a large cell on the 10th floor of Miami's Dade County Jail, and later from this 6-by-8-foot cell, federal investigators acknowledge he managed to steal as much as $2 million worth of merchandise.
And how did the business work? Accomplices on the outside provided Ferries with hundreds of credit card numbers taken from charge slips in hotel dumpsters. And then he used those credit card numbers to order merchandise from mail order catalogs by telephone, arranging for the items to be delivered overnight. Again, to accomplices on the outside who would sell the goods and split the proceeds with Ferries.
Ferries even persuaded his fellow inmates to let him use their extension telephone as his own private line.
You take the extension phone into your cell.
Actually, it was a vacant cell that I quite literally had turned into an office. We were having a ball.
And you did business?
Oh, yes, sir, a bumper business.
And it went on for 4 years, with Ferries ordering everything from collectible gold and silver coins to Rolex watches to video camcorders. And with the help of those accomplices on the outside, he hit states from one end of the country to the other.
Oh, it's so easy to find Confederates. I split right half with everybody. I mean, I never took more than half. I got robbed a lot, but again, you kind of take it on the chin, you know what I mean? It was, like you said, it was all free.
So he ordered cases of the best champagne and gourmet gift baskets and thousands of roses, and he had them sent to the families of other inmates and even to his prison guards.
They're working stiffs, you know, they're not making much money, and they're seeing this stuff going on, and they're hearing about Dom Perignon and trips to the Caribbean, and there I am in my cell. They know what's up. There's not, you know, and, you know, I tried to send at Christmas and on holidays, I tried to send out, you know, baskets. And
it cost them nothing?
Oh, no, perish the thought. No.
Of course, jail officials deny that guards accepted gifts, but one investigator told us off camera that he believes some guards did receive items from Danny. And we even found evidence that Danny dabbled in charity.
I have here a Save the Children Federation, Inc., Westport, Connecticut, addressed to Daniel Ferris, 1151 Northwest 11th Street, Suite 104. That's your jail cell.
I'll be darned. Yeah.
Save the Children.
Well, yeah. Here, again, when you have nothing but 24 hours a day, and you know, late night on Sunday night, after everybody has gone to bed for sure, they always put these little poor, pitiful, with flies crawling out of their nose, Biafran babies and stuff on it. I mean, heartbreaking stuff. 1-800 number, MasterCard and Visa. And it's just a phone call. My position was when the people got their credit card bill and look at it and they say, well, I didn't order Save the Children here for $22, and they look at the poor children, they've all flashed on those poor starving children. I can't believe that most of them aren't still paying that $22, Mr. Wallace. I would, if somebody did this to me and said, look, give, doggone it.
But what about the cops? Well, they were not amused by the jailhouse shopping network.
I think Danny Ferris is a convicted killer and a con man, nothing more.
Lieutenant Ross Hughes and fellow officer Raul Ubieta of the Metro-Dade Police spent months building a case against Ferris, and they knew he had confessed to murdering a friend while under the influence of cocaine.
He's already in jail for murder, possibly facing the electric chair, so the fellow had no fear of any reprisal for the fraud that he was doing.
So he engaged in what is called the jailhouse shopping network.
And he was
very successful enterprise.
And he was very comfortable in that role.
And he would remain comfortably in business because Hughes and Ubieta's case against him was eventually dropped by the Dade State's Attorney. Why? Insufficient credible evidence, the State's Attorney said. The two Metro-Dade investigators continued to warn jail officials about Ferris' continued phone access, but jail officials said it would violate Danny's rights to take his phone away.
He is allowed access to a telephone.
In order to steal?
He is allowed access to a telephone.
Well, I know,
Now,
but
what he
you
did
know
with the
perfectly well he
telephone-
was stealing. I mean, this must have been a matter of some frustration to you guys, who've been after him now, according to this, for a year or two, and you're getting no place with it.
Anytime an investigation doesn't come to a proper conclusion for the investigator, it's frustrating, so.
Listen, you told the correction personnel, go in there and take the phone out of the cell. What'd they tell you?
If I recall the memo right, that he couldn't do that.
Jail officials finally did search Ferris' cell, seizing hundreds of credit card numbers. But that didn't put him out of business because he still had a telephone and one hidden credit card number.
And I had written this on the bottom of my bunk. And it was a woman's card, though. It was Regina Donovan was the name. And it was a good number. I said, well, here we go. We got to do something.
So Ferris used the credit card number to pay for a newspaper ad and a telephone answering service.
And I ran an ad in USA Today saying, cosmetic package, $89.95 value for only $19.95. All major credit cards accepted. Please call and Regina Donovan Cosmetics, our 1-800 number.
But Danny never intended to sell any cosmetics. All he was after was a fresh batch of credit card numbers.
Well, the girls there, they take the orders and they write down, okay, thank you for calling Regina Donovan. May I help you? Yes, we saw your ad. Oh, yes. May we have, what credit card will we be using today? They wrote the number, the expiration. And then at the end of the day, I would call and they'd have all these numbers. It was incredible. And so I just got a whole new stack of numbers and I was off. Whew.
You could call him up any time of the day or night, and he was working around the clock, particularly when I was interviewing him.
Pete Collins is a freelance writer in Miami who is writing a book about Danny Ferris and his jailhouse shopping network.
The operation was working in as many as 40 states. There were as many as 150 drop sites, dozens of employees, $750,000 documented in stolen goods, perhaps up to $2 to $4 million. And that was just during an 11-month window of his captivity.
And you got this mostly from the Secret Service?
I got all of that from the Secret Service.
That's right, the Secret Service. In addition to protecting the president and going after counterfeiters, they also work credit card fraud cases, and they began to investigate the jailhouse shopping network, too. They searched Danny's cell twice, and they confiscated over 1,000 stolen credit card numbers and catalogs. But Danny still had access to a telephone, and he still did business, just as he had for nearly 4 years.
even on my cell door at ICDC in Dade County, I had a MasterCard and a Visa logo on the outside of my door. It was pretty wide open. So
everybody knew what you were doing, and you kept on doing it.
It was incredible. I don't know. I just say.
I don't get it. Why would they give you access to a phone if they knew what you were doing?
I give a great phone.
I'm quite serious. Why would they keep letting you have access to a telephone?
I don't know. I of course, every time that they would say, if you don't stop this, we're going to take your phone away. I said, okay, then I won't do it anymore.
But Danny knew that he had a legal right to phone privileges while awaiting trial, so he was able to go on stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars in merchandise.
Here we go.
We wanted to find out more for ourselves about telephone access for the inmates at the Dade County Jail, so we went there to take a look.
There's a guy on the phone right there.
And nothing had changed. We visited Danny's old cell.
This was the office that Danny Ferries worked out of?
Yes, sir.
Not much bigger than somebody's bathroom.
We were amazed to find a list of telephone numbers on Danny's old cell wall. So we called one.
LL Bean Order Department. Can I order some merchandise this way? And I can order how much? Can I order 100 or 1,000 or $10,000 worth of stuff? No limit. My name is Mike Wallace, and I work for 60 Minutes, and I'm sitting in a cell.
LL Bean hadn't heard about the jailhouse shopping network, but they did say that credit card fraud is a problem for them. And LL Bean had received an order from one Tommy Chappell, the inmate who inherited Danny's old cell.
Explain something. I go into your cell, and suddenly I see on the wall.
All the Danny's numbers.
Are those Danny's numbers?
It turns out that Tommy Chappell was only one of many inmates who had learned how to use the jailhouse shopping network, courtesy of Danny Ferries.
They don't even have to be terribly intelligent and only marginally capable. It's not. It doesn't. It's like a train, Mr. Wallace. I feel like I constructed a train, and just darn near anybody can drive a train. Heck, it's on a track. All you got to do is put the fuel in, credit card numbers, and this train will go.
But Tommy wasn't about to acknowledge to us that he had graduated from the Danny Ferries College of Credit Card Manipulation.
You've never done any of this?
No.
Raise your hand.
Since Tommy Chappell wasn't going to confess, we asked Sergeant Ted Tate of the Metro Dade Credit Card Squad what was going on, what is going on at the Dade County Jail.
Sergeant Tate, level with me. It's still going on.
Yes, sir, it is.
In Dade County.
Yes, sir, it is.
In ICDC. Over telephones. With credit cards.
It's going on in the Dade County jail system, yes, sir.
How come?
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, surely Lonnie Lawrence, the director of Dade County Corrections, the man who requested a Secret Service search of Danny Ferry's cell, he could explain why the jailhouse shopping network was still alive and well.
There are legal guidelines that say that we shall provide phone access to inmates.
Inside the cell?
Yes. They don't care where you provide it as long as you provide it.
But what about inmates who abuse the phone system? For instance,
let's say he's threatening the judge who put him away on the phone.
We still have the ability to do that.
You can take that phone away?
We take the phone away.
So you can actually take phone privileges away. What you have not been able to do is to take phone privileges away from guys who are in jail and scamming over the phone.
Well, I think that we've been able to restrict their phone privileges.
I went into Danny Ferris's old cell this morning, 3 hours ago.
Right.
Right there is the telephone. Right there on the wall is a list of 1-800 numbers and credit card numbers. I called LL Bean. They were taking my order. I was playing Danny Ferris.
Right over again.
Slick as it could be.
Well, you know, we don't have a perfect system.
And nobody knows that better than Danny Ferries. He was finally sentenced to 5 years for credit card fraud on top of an earlier life term for murder. And he was moved to the Charlotte Correctional Institution, a much tougher Florida state prison where, with prison guards looking on, we met a chastened Danny Ferries. He told us the prison officials here have made sure he can no longer practice his trade.
I would like to be very clear. I don't want them perish the thought that they might think I'm still wielding my telephonic sword. You know what I mean? I can't do that.
Why not?
Here in the state prisons, it's they're much more sophisticated.
The state prisons are more sophisticated?
Yes, they're in the way that.
So what you're saying is you're going straight, perforce, now at Charlotte Correctional Center.
Yeah, well, or having to go in a new direction because Yeah, well, I mean, come on. I'm not just going to roll over, Mr. Wallace.
Isn't there a lady in Fort Lauderdale you've been talking to?
I don't know. Who you...
Didn't you offer to set her up in business and rent an apartment from her as a drop site?
Oh, I'm sure that I probably did.
Recently?
See, you would get a fella in trouble with all these folks standing around us here.
Well, I mean, come on. I mean, you've just professed innocence. You don't do it anymore. That's what you just told me, Danny.
I know. Well, you know, here's what I've done.
But somehow you're in touch with a lady in Fort Lauderdale renting an apartment which is going to be a drop site where you are ordering, or she is ordering, or somebody is ordering camcorders and things like this.
As he nervously takes a drink of his root beer.
I mean, you're a crook.
Well.
And a murderer.
That's what they say. Doggone, I wish they didn't say that, though.
Danny Farias has been moved to yet another Florida state prison, and he's been told that he'll be isolated from his fellow inmates if he ever abuses the telephone privilege again. And Dade County jail officials say they now have new procedures for inmate phones. After we went down there to report this story, those inside jail cell telephones were removed. Buy yourself a lottery ticket, and no matter how high your hopes of hitting the jackpot, the odds against it are even higher. But suppose someone promised that you could sweeten the odds by buying shares in pools of tickets from various lotteries around the world. Well, that's exactly what authorities say that a con man named of Blair Down did. Operating out of Canada, Down's army of telephone solicitors, 500 of them working in shifts, targeted mostly elderly Americans because they were lonely and susceptible to anyone with a kind word. So all told, Down conned them out of an estimated $200 million to $300 million in one of the biggest telemarketing scams in history.
Everything's fine, okay?
Irene Taylor, a widow from Tyler, Texas, says a woman from Down Syndicate named of Sharon became one of her best friends, calling her constantly, promising she'd win a fortune if she would just send the money to invest in shares of foreign lottery tickets from Spain and Australia.
She would talk about my family and her family. She'd say, now, won't it be nice if you win money to help them, help your children do something, since you do not have money now that your husband's not there?
What, would you send them money or checks? Or?
Well, I sent checks at first, but then they got where they wanted MasterCard or Visa, so they could get their money immediately.
You gave them your credit card number?
Yes, and what kind of made me get suspicious was I got to being billed for some that I did not tell them to bill me for. And I would call Sharon, and she'd say, well, I'll have it taken right off. Well, they would take it off, but maybe in 2 days then it was put back on. And I got $3,000 or $4,000 done that way.
Even so, for nearly 8 years, Mrs. Taylor kept sending money to Sharon, about $15,000 in all, without ever getting a dime in winnings, and not even one lottery ticket to show for it.
So see, I'm a sucker for some things, Mike.
Sergeant Don Smith runs the Vice and Gambling Unit for the Vancouver, Canada Police Department. He says the victims were told that if they bought shares in foreign lottery tickets, not just a single ticket, they would win a fortune. But Smith says no fortunes ever came their way, and the buyers never even received proof that any lottery tickets were actually purchased. When people were ready to quit, Sergeant Smith says, Down Syndicate lied to them, saying they were winners, but could collect their jackpot only if they sent in more money. And incredibly, a lot of people did.
We've had victims arrive in Vancouver. They're convinced that they've won millions of dollars. They've hopped on the first plane available. They arrive in Vancouver, hoping to go to this address, only to realize all of a sudden they're showing up in front of a post office box, and nobody knows the location of the company.
Hi, Ray.
81-year-old Ray Koronek, a nursing home resident, was another Down victim. Down Syndicate had taken him for $40,000 by the time he taped a Down salesman trying to get even more money from him by calling him Dad.
I'm not dealing with you as a third person. You're my dad anyways. I don't have a dad, and I treat you as a dad. Dad, you had your life.
I tell you what, I'm so disappointed that I ever
you're not, because if you do your part properly, you will get your winnings. But you didn't do your part properly. That's the problem.
Oh, my God.
Okay?
Am I ever in trouble?
And I wish you the
If
good
my sons ever found out how much money I gave you, they would never forgive me.
I wish you the good luck and God bless you, Dad.
I'm going to probably even get sick over this.
Now, what kind of credit card do you have?
That's what makes it so despicable, is that they purposely go out of their way to develop a sucker list of elderly people, and they take great sport in trying to bilk them out of as much money as possible.
And this is James Blair Down, the man behind so much misery. A Canadian, Down built his telemarketing empire with the names of elderly Americans, potential suckers, that he bought from companies that compiled such lists for advertisers and salesmen. As seen in this undercover video, Down was living well with a taste that ran to racehorses and foreign bank accounts, and the $17 million mansion he bought on beachfront property in Barbados. So why didn't Canadian authorities stop Blair Down? Sergeant Smith says Canada lacked the incentive to really go after Down, who lived in Vancouver, because his victims were Americans only. But in America, as Down's victims grew into the hundreds of thousands, authorities were feeling the heat. Katrina Flaumer, the U.S. Attorney in Seattle, had been pursuing Blair Down for years. So we asked Ms. Flaumer why stopping Down was so difficult.
It takes time and commitment to start processes in different foreign countries. Here we were dealing with Canada, we were dealing with Barbados, we were dealing with Switzerland, we were dealing with the Cayman Islands, we were dealing with the Channel Islands.
You're mentioning all of those places because that's where he had stashed his money?
Correct.
Eventually, Down tired of all those U.S. investigators trying to corner him, so he engineered what his critics say was his biggest con of all. This time, they say, his victim was the U.S. government.
In a deal negotiated with the U.S. Attorney in Seattle, Down agreed to serve 180 days in jail in the United States and to pay back $12.4 million of the hundreds of millions that he had allegedly taken from elderly Americans.
That was chump change to him, given the money that he had secreted away in offshore accounts and other investments.
Do you know what happened to Blair Down?
Some time in jail.
6 months.
Slap on the wrist.
The story goes that he's made a profit of something like $200 million.
Pretty good. Of other people's money.
Anything at all to say to the people, to the elderly people who lost some of their life savings?
We don't want to knock the camera. We don't want to knock the camera.
Down declined our repeated efforts to talk to him. Ms. Flaumer, the U.S. Attorney in Seattle, says that Down's plea bargain was the best deal possible for everyone involved.
That's a result I think we should all be happy with.
Overall, one hears that perhaps he got away with $200 million or maybe $300 million, right?
I wouldn't presume to put a number on that.
Why not?
Because what we proved was that the $12.5 million which we seized was the result of international telemarketing and marketing of lottery shares. That's what we proved, that's what he pled guilty to, and that's the money that we seized and paid back to the victims.
And that's what you're ashamed of, that you were only able to get $12.5 million when people talk about $200 or $300 million from Americans.
I'm not at all ashamed of what we've done.
U.S. Attorney Flaumer doesn't believe that Down will walk away with $200 million because of expenses he incurred running his telemarketing empire. But Sergeant Smith disagrees.
We believe that his ventures netted him at least $210 million.
Netted him?
Yes.
After expenses?
Yes.
Because I talked to the U.S. Attorney in Seattle, and she suggested that that was way out of line.
Well, that's one of the problems you have, or areas of concern when you have different agencies participating in an investigation, as to everybody has a small piece of the picture as opposed to the larger picture in its entirety.
It sounds like a good deal. In other words, okay, I'll take 6 months. You can have $12.3 million. Get off my back.
That's it. And I think when he agreed to that deal, he felt that was probably going to be the end of his problems.
But to Down's surprise, it wasn't. On his second day behind bars, he learned that someone, somehow, had managed to find and to freeze tens of millions of dollars of his assets that were stashed around the world. And that person wasn't anyone from the U.S. government. It was Martin Kenny, a Canadian citizen who runs a company out of Dublin, Ireland called Interclaim. You never lost any money to Blair Down?
No.
Never tried to scam you?
No.
Never been personally victimized by him?
Absolutely not.
So, what is Interclaim's and Martin Kenny's interest in Blair Down?
The best way to define Interclaim is to say that we seek to recover the fruits of economic crime in partnership with the victims. It's a special new company. We don't think there's another one like it anywhere in the world.
And as far as we can determine, there isn't. Martin Kenny and his backers have already spent more than $2 million betting that they can do what the government did not. Force Blair Down to return more than $100 million they say that he took from elderly U.S. citizens. If successful, Down is challenging their actions in a Canadian court. If successful, Interclaim will split down the middle with Down's victims whatever money they recover. But first, Martin Kenny had to find Down's assets. So when Blair Down's brother and sister-in-law, who were suspected of hiding Down's riches, a charge they've denied, when they embarked on a Christmas cruise from Santiago, Chile to Buenos Aires, Interclaim's undercover spies were right there with them.
We arranged with the captain of the vessel to sit at table with them, to befriend them throughout the duration of the trip. Tim Down, Blair's brother, spent about $70,000 on the trip, lost $40,000 in gambling on the vessel, and then invited our operatives to Calgary to get to know them more and to wine and dine them in their restaurant called Chow Baby.
Meanwhile, before Down went to jail, Interclaim agents were following and covertly videotaping him at family dinners, at business meetings, even at this strip club. Then, with the details of what they say were Down's ill-gotten gains, Interclaim secretly convinced a court in Vancouver to freeze $100 million in Down's assets, including 27 commercial buildings in Calgary owned by his brother and sister-in-law. Interclaim's goal? Force Down into bankruptcy so that his assets could be liquidated and given to his victims. He didn't know that you guys were going after him.
He did not know that many courts, 8 courts in 7 countries, had given us the most extraordinary of relief that unlocked the secrets to how he had laundered the proceeds of his crime and where that wealth sat.
What did you think when you first heard what Interclaim had done to Blair Down?
I was happy. The only way you can slow these people down is you have to hurt them financially. And he stands at the chance of losing everything. That makes me very happy.
Not so happy was the Down family lawyer who called Interclaim, quote, an international commercial terrorist who practices extortion. And what did the U.S. Attorney in Seattle think of Interclaim's action? Interclaim grabbed commercial buildings in Alberta. They got his $17.5 million home in Cove Spring, Barbados. They got access to his telephone, accounting, real estate, and lawyers' records around the world. And court orders issued in Vancouver froze Down's bank accounts, along with hundreds of thousands of dollars in the trust accounts of Down's lawyers.
Interclaim hasn't been awarded those damages. They have simply frozen assets preliminary to litigation that may go on for years.
Ms. Flower says the important thing is that everyone who lost a lot of money has gotten all of it back thanks to her office. But Martin Kenny says that simply is not so.
All I know is that we estimate there are about 1 million victims out there, and only 480 people have received any kind of compensation to date.
And Kenny says the U.S. government had no way of identifying all of Down's victims because the U.S. government did not have access to all of Down's sucker lists. You know, the U.S. attorney told us yesterday that there was nobody out there, as far as she knew, who lost a lot of money, who got nothing back. But you're one of the people.
Well, I didn't get nothing back.
And you lost a lot of money.
Well, to me, it's a lot of money. It may not be to some people.
This past summer, while Irene Taylor was still trying to get her $15,000 back, James Blair Down walked out of this Seattle jail after 180 days behind bars. Having paid his debt to society, he is now a free man. Last August, a Canadian judge ruled that Interclaim had no legal standing in this case, but the judge, obviously sympathetic to the victims, virtually invited an appeal. Interclaim, the judge wrote, offers the most realistic opportunity for the compensation claims of the victims, and Interclaim is in fact appealing. Meantime, the bulk of Down's assets remain frozen.